GiiKER have just announced the Smart Sudoku, their latest electronic board game. To date, GiiKER have been systematically bringing back some of our favourite retro toys and giving them a modern feel by turning them into electronic board games. We've seen them recreate versions of those little slidey puzzles we used to get as kids where there was a picture and all the squares were messed up and you had to slide them into the right place. We've seen them bring back a real world version of Tetris, and we've even seen them bringing back a 3D electronic version of Connect 4. Every time GiiKER have managed to bring back the nostalgia and add something extra to make these games incredibly replayable. And the latest addition is Smart Sudoku. Now straight away we can see the trademark GiiKER style in Smart Sudoku with the bright colours, with the blocky design, and with the digital screens for information. First you have the game board screen, which lets you know how to set up each Sudoku experience. Following on, we've got a control panel which lets you change settings and change difficulty. We've got the main screen which lets you know how you're performing in the game, and then we've got the gameplay area itself. Now for anybody who's familiar with Sudoku, you'll know exactly what's going on here, but for those of you who aren't, Sudoku is a game where you've got to basically make lines horizontal and vertically of numbers where there's no repetition, but also the gameplay area is split up into 6 blocks, and each one of those blocks you have to make sure there's no repeated numbers in there as well. Now Sudoku is traditionally played on paper, so when you're transitioning it to a real world physical game, you have to make sure that it feels great and that it's enjoyable to play, especially when you're competing with something as simple as just pen and paper. And as with all their previous products, GiiKER have done a great job of making this easy to use, comfortable and fun. Each of the counters have a little lip on the end which makes them easy to pull out, and when you're clicking them into the gameplay area they have little rubber buttons that they sit on that hold the counters in place, meaning that if you turn the device upside down or drop it they won't fall out. The little buttons on them have a rubber membrane which makes them feel a lot like buttons on a gameplay controller, giving you that nice clickiness. And that's really important because to put the counters down, what you need to do is whenever you put the number down, you need to click it the number of times to represent the number it is. So for example, if you put a number 3 counter down, you've got to press 3 times as well. Now at first I thought this was going to be a little bit annoying. I thought maybe the buttons would have some magnetic sensor which would make them realize what number was being put down. But in all honesty, when you start playing it, it's a breeze doing this, and to be honest, it actually feels quite nice and therapeutic in the same way like popping bubble wrap can. The clicky feeling of the buttons feels nice and is really quite rewarding. And every time you click on a button there's a little screen at the top which tells you which number you're representing, so it's easy to tell which number you're putting down. Now GiiKER Smart Sudoku, like all the previous devices, has a range of difficulty settings as well. And one thing I did find is that if you're playing on the easy setting at the beginning where there's a lot of the counters already in the board, making for a more easy puzzle, it can take you more time to actually put the counters into the board to set up the game than it does to actually complete the game itself. However, if you're moving on to level 3 onwards, which is where I suspect most people will be playing, because there's nowhere near the same amount of counters that make the gameplay board to start the game, this is not an issue and you set the board up pretty quickly and you spend all your time trying to figure out the puzzle. Now it might seem a little bit pointless as to how easy some of those early levels are, but we have to remember that there's some people that aren't familiar with Sudoku, or there might be some young kids wanting to play this, and this acts as a great introduction to how the Sudoku game works. But if you're an absolute Sudoku pro like my wife, then you can go all the way up to the higher levels, which provide some really challenging experiences. When you do start the Sudoku game itself, especially on some of the more challenging levels, as those of you who are familiar with a Sudoku game, sometimes you've got to start with a little bit of trial and error because there could be a number of variations of options of what number could go in which square. And with Sudoku, you've just kind of got to go for it and develop as you go along, and then when you realize maybe you've made some mistakes early on, then you go back and change them. Pen and paper, you're usually trying to rub those out or scribble over the pen. Whereas Smart Sudoku solves this issue because whenever you put a counter down, it will immediately tell you if it's in the right place or the wrong place. Now this does mean that at the beginning of a lot of the challenges, there's some trial and error that goes into place as you put a counter down, and if it tells you it's in the wrong place, you try it somewhere else. It does make for the first few steps in these Sudoku challenges feel a little less like a challenge and more like just a trial and error process, but once you get through those first couple of placements, you start to see the pattern emerge, and then the challenge really kicks in, and it comes to a case of actually trying to figure out which counter needs to go where. But also there's a challenge in and of itself of trying to make as few mistakes as possible. If you get through the whole Sudoku experience without any crosses, meaning that you put a counter in the wrong place, it's incredibly rewarding. And at the end of each gameplay session, it tells you how long it took you to complete that challenge. But what I really love about Smart Sudoku is that it takes it one level further, and you can actually play this as a multiplayer experience. If two people have two of these devices, much like in the classic Game Boy games, you can link them up and play them against each other, compete and see who can solve the challenges the quickest. This for me was a really nice addition and really took me back to those Tetris days of linking up and competing with each other. And this is what I really love about Smart Sudoku and GiiKER's other products, is that they really captured that retro nostalgia with the sounds, with the lights. All of the feedback really gives you that retro vibe and really takes me back to the days of the mid-90s when these electronic devices were really starting to become popular. I remember opening on Christmas Day an electronic tic-tac-toe, and I spent hours playing that game, and the lights and the sounds really brought it to life. And these GiiKER products really take me back to that. I really think they're great for the older generation looking to enjoy some of those classic gameplay experiences in a more modern way, but also great for introducing these games to a younger generation. Games where kids really can learn and develop their understanding and cognitive thinking. And that's why I think Smart Sudoku and the GiiKER lineup are fantastic gift ideas. If you want to get your hands on one, links will be in the description below. And if you want to check out some of their other products, check this out right here.